Fight scenes are one of many tools that can be used to complement a narrative. The best fight scenes are like an ice cream sundae. Good fight scenes are like a cherry on top. Bad fight scenes, however, are like cherry tomatoes. And I hate tomatoes. But you're probably thinking, what constitutes a bad fight? And why did you put Paul Atreides on the thumbnail? Well, in this video, I'm going to break down a system to analyze every fight ever and see what separates the good from the bad. Hopefully after you watch this video, I'll have ruined every bad fight for you like I've ruined them for myself, and maybe have made the good ones a little bit better. Firstly, I just want to quickly cover 3 prerequisites that you've probably heard a million times watching video essays. Stakes. The fight should have something on the line. Nothing gets an audience more invested than knowing something is at stake. The most watched broadcasts every year are always the Super Bowl or the World Cup. I never watch soccer, but I tuned into the last World Cup finals because the stage was set for a legendary matchup between old GOAT Messi and future GOAT Mbappe. Their clashing legacies, with everyone in the world watching, were the inherent stakes. Not every fight has to be the World Cup, but every fight needs something on the line or the audience has no reason to care. Consequences. Similar to the idea of stakes, good fights need to have consequences. If a stake is something we're aware of before the fight occurs, the consequences are the aftermath. Let the characters break like a child's toys. What's worse than watching a supercharged, beautifully choreographed attack get eaten up like a kid's meal? If nothing has changed from the beginning of the fight to the end of the fight, except unnamed thugs 1 through 4 are taken out, then why did this fight even exist? That question of why brings us to the third prerequisite: purpose. A good fight has a purpose. A good story has a purpose. This is the narrative I was talking about earlier, and every aspect of a good story is closely tied to said purpose. This, of course, includes the fights. I also just want to quickly mention power scaling before we dive in. Power scaling is a way fans compare characters across franchises, often using their specific feats as milestones to leverage against the other character's feats. It ends with a binary, concrete result of which character would win in a fight. All you really need to know is that power scaling is stupid. I'll explain why later. Finally, let's begin. Not all fights are equal. Today we'll break down 4 classifications, which I think every fight can be categorized by. They can be plotted on this chart that compares the audience's understanding of the two parties' relative strength prior to the matchup. I say parties because it can be any number of individuals. What's important to understand is this chart does not take into account if the fight is good or bad. It just gives a general understanding of the matchup before it takes place, kind of like betting odds before a game. Lastly, winning does not necessarily mean defeating the opponent, it just means succeeding in their objective. It does work best, however, when the two parties' goals are mutually exclusive. Fly swatting. Strong winner, weak loser. Sometimes a matchup is formed and the outcome is all but decided before the first punch. Some of the most stale, mind-numbing fight scenes you have ever seen would fall under this category. However, when done well, fly swatting can be used to set powerful tones, create iconic scenes, and develop complex characters. The question is, when a fight is so predictable, how can we make it entertaining? Firstly, be punctual. Land the plane before the audience even realizes it took off. Don't even give them a chance to breathe. The trope of playing with one's food is grossly overdone. Nothing pulls me out of a fight scene faster than seeing a character wait for their opponent to get back up. I'd say that in general, the longer a fly swatting fight takes place, the more bored the audience will become. Think of literally swatting a fly. You have to be fast and impactful. The longer you try to catch it, the more tedious the task becomes. Also, it should be terrifying. Let their attacks be felt through the screen. Remember what I said about consequences earlier? The aftermath of these fights should range from brutality to complete devastation. These fights are showcases of what these characters are truly capable of. This is highlight reel material. When you were 12 and watched LeBron James Heat videos on YouTube, you didn't see layup after layup, you saw him have The best example of fly swatting that comes to mind is from Invincible. You probably already know the scene. In 2 quick minutes, Omni-Man crushes the Guardians of the Globe like bugs. This scene was so effective because it was punctual and it was terrifying. He didn't waste a breath with dialogue, he didn't wait for them to get ready or swing back. From the get-go, he wanted all the smoke. The aftermath of every single blow he delivered could be felt through the screen. Besides completely clear-cutting the cast that was just introduced earlier that episode, there's more that this fight achieved. Throughout this video, every category of fight that I will cover will require at least one of 2 things in order to be what I consider good. What a good fly swatting fight requires is characterization of the victor. Dive into their minds. Did the character spare anyone? Did they hesitate? Or did they laugh? Why are they even fighting down like this? Were they forced to, or did they simply want to? Fly swatting could also just be an example of their capabilities. Ultimately, a fly swatting fight should leave the audience with a better understanding of the character than they previously had. So back to Invincible. After watching the Omni-Man fight, the audience were left with a ton of questions, but they were also given answers. They now knew what Omni-Man was capable of. They knew he was a loose cannon, and any character on the screen was vulnerable to him at all times. Most importantly, they knew that Invincible is a show with writers that won't pull their punches. The important principles of fly swatting should carry over into just about every fight with strong characters. Be fast and be ruthless. David vs. Goliath. Weak winner, strong loser. The exact opposite of a fly swatting would be a David vs. Goliath, the classic underdog story. When done well, these fights can make unforgettable climaxes or teach valuable lessons that get passed down for generations. When done poorly, however, these can feel like cheap cop-outs or just lazy plot armor. For David vs. Goliath fights, my must-have requirement is strategy. Win conditions. Outs. Checkmates. Hard-earned resolutions. Emphasis on the hard. Anyone can write a Deus Ex Machina or have the power of friendship as the secret the heroes needed all along. What has an infinitely more satisfying payoff is when the characters are put in a tight, claustrophobic box, the walls are caving in on them, and they put their heads together to find the one way out. Almost like how in Infinity War, Doctor Strange said there was only one path out of 14 million where they would win. But that was complete BS. What specifically did they do in that path as their win condition that the other 14 million failed to? Did they punch harder in this one? You can't think of anything specific, can you? The key to good strategy is that the audience needs to have a strong understanding of the win condition in order for it to be a satisfying payoff. Let's look at Doctor Strange one more time. At the end of Doctor Strange 2016, the stage is set for a fight between him, a wizard on a rookie contract, and Dormammu, a demonic celestial god capable of energy projection, protective shields, time travel, teleportation, telepathy, soul manipulation, life force absorption, dimensional portal creation, elemental control, and the creation of artificial beings. I think it's fair to chalk this one up as a David vs. Goliath. But what makes this fight good? How does Doctor Strange win? Well, Dormammu realizes being bad is not nice, and the two hug it out. And then Captain Marvel comes in and blasts Dormammu with a friendship cannon and saves the day. Psych. Doctor Strange uses strategy. Knowing that Dormammu exists outside of time, Doctor Strange finds his out. He uses the Time Stone to trap Dormammu in a time loop. While Doctor Strange technically experiences his own death over and over, he really only experiences it once. Dormammu, on the other hand, experiences this over and over and remembers each time. He's trapped and he knows it. Checkmate. Or I guess technically a stalemate, but Doctor Strange saves the day and lives to tell the tale. A win in my book. The beauty of strategy and the downfall of power scaling is that sometimes 1 + 2 is greater than 3. This idea is called non-summativity. The sum of the parts is greater than the whole. David plus Slingshot is greater than Goliath. If rock beats scissors and scissors beats paper, shouldn't rock beat paper? No, because paper uses the unique strategy that its niche allows. Paper is good at, I don't even know why, but strategy, baby. While I believe every David vs. Goliath fight absolutely requires strategy, you can never go wrong with adding characterization when it fits. Doctor Strange achieved characterization by showing how he changed from a self-absorbed man to one willing to die for eternity if it means saving others. One last way a David vs. Goliath could pan out is what I would call a blunder, when the winning party capitalizes off a grave mistake by the losing party. I typically don't think this makes for a good fight, but I can see situations where it serves as a strong way to characterize the loser. Think the tortoise and the hare. The lesson is that slow and steady wins the race, but what really decided the race was the hare's ego. Toss-up. Even strength between the winner and the loser. I would say a majority of all fights fall in the fly swatting category as a result of lazy writing and the ever-growing demand for action, but a majority of pretty good fights fall in the toss-up category. As a matchup grows more even, the predictability should more resemble a coin flip. Coin flips are unpredictable, which make for an inherently entertaining matchup, hence the name toss-up. It could very well go heads or tails. What's important to remember here is it should feel like a coin flip, but actually be done with intention. Remember that prerequisite of purpose? We want to find a delicate balance of keeping things interesting, but not actually random. Sure, the good guy will probably win, but the question is why or how. Toss-ups have flexibility. My requirement for a toss-up is either good characterization or good strategy. Give them a proper challenge that can only be overcome with either a pivotal, character-forming decision they make, or a brilliant, jaw-dropping strategy that dazzles the audience. Let's first think of characterization. Despite the close matchup, the winner comes out on top because they are more fill in the blank. Is the blank tough? Is it about how many times they can get hit and keep going? Or is the blank merciless? Maybe the villain wins because they aren't afraid to cut corners and go for cheap shots. The blank can essentially be any defining trait of a character. What the blank should not be is lucky. Unless the character's entire shtick is luck, take Domino from Deadpool for example, then the deciding factor in an even matchup should be as far from luck as possible. Luck is easy to write and boring to watch. A great example of a toss-up fight is the Vi and Sevica bar fight from Arcane. Roughly speaking, they're about equal in strength, classifying it as a toss-up. The reason this fight wins my stamp of approval is because it is decided by some pretty fantastic characterization. The two are throwing absolute haymakers. You can feel their exhaustion and their rage, especially when Vi throws that glass at Sevica during a moment they're catching their breath. Good touch, but that's not what makes this fight special. After Sevica brings out her sword arm, she hits Vi with a clean combo and it looks like the fight is over. Then, a familiar voice reminds Vi two things. First, her guard needs work. Second, people are counting on Vi. She gets a needed second wind. Sevica is coming from the top rope to finish Vi for good. This time, however, Vi takes a defensive stance, because, of course, her guard needs work. And work it does, allowing for a quick parry and a smooth combo to finish Sevica off. Vi won because of characterization. I think the fill-in-the-blank reason Vi wins would be because she's more protective. Her choice to raise her guard represents a shift in her character, a shift in her maturity, and reminds us of her responsibilities to Powder. Sevica, on the other hand, in a lack of protectiveness, left herself exposed, costing her the fight. If that blank we are filling in is something along the lines of intelligent, then this toss-up requires a cohesive strategy rather than characterization. When we see a character emerge victorious because they outsmart their opponent, it should be shown exactly how they find their out. Robert Downey Jr.'s Sherlock Holmes movies are a great source of strategic toss-up fights. The entire appeal to his fights are the strategies he makes through his keen observance. Here we have him matched up against a strong, large fighter. You might think we were pushing David vs. Goliath territory, but before the fight kicks off, we already know Sherlock is in an intelligence class of his own. I think it's fair to say this makes it a relatively even matchup. Sherlock wins the fight because he hits smarter, not harder. If we only got the sped up cut of his combination of attacks, it would make for a fun yet unexpected victory that would leave us, like the spectators in the arena, asking, "Where did that come from?" What makes this fight so satisfying is that his thoughts walk the audience through the reasoning behind each action. Like I mentioned with David vs. Goliath fights, understanding a strategy's win condition makes or breaks the payoff. Does Sherlock's fight achieve characterization? In my opinion, not really. We already know Sherlock is observant and tactical. Is it a good fight? Absolutely, because the breakdown of his strategy is massively entertaining. It's a complement to the narrative, it's like the cherry on top. This is why I think it's okay for a toss-up fight to be decided by either characterization or strategy. If a fight achieves both, more power to it. But for a fight like a toss-up, I don't think having both is mandatory. However, there are fights we will cover later where I believe having both is non-negotiable. To close out the toss-up category, I have a hot take about a fight you probably like, and it comes from Dune 2. The final fight, Paul vs. Fade, is a bit lackluster to me. Let me explain why I think so, and what I think could have made it better. So we have two well-trained fighters, about evenly matched, a true toss-up. The stakes are well established. This is a fight to the death with political power, honor, and justice on the line. What I'm looking for is either strategy or characterization. The fight begins, and they exchange kicks, blocks, headbutts, until Fade connects with Paul's knife into Paul's own abdomen. Fade approaches to finish Paul off, who catches the blade with his hand, and then, the fight's over. Paul won? So apparently off the screen, Paul took the knife out his side and stabbed Fade in the chest. Okay then. Watching this, it didn't really hit for me. Obviously it was a conscious director's choice for the winning move to be outside the frame. But was this the right choice? First, let's talk strategy, or the lack of it. The two fighters just go through the motions of a standard, albeit impressive, choreography. Why does Paul win the fight? Paul wins the fight because he stabs Fade better than Fade stabs him? Not really any strategy there. How about characterization? You could say Paul wins because he's more tough, more determined, and better at not dying, I guess? Sounds like we're pushing toward the territory of plot armor. I do think this fight was close to good though, and could be fixed with one minor adjustment. Paul's fight-winning play was to secretly remove the knife from his side while Fade was distracted with the other blade. The secrecy was emphasized by the fact that we, the audience, couldn't even see the action. But why do they choose to emphasize secrecy? Are we supposed to connect secrecy with Paul's character? Supposed to take away that he's a sneaky little trickster? This fight is about his toughness, his determination. So why is it decided by a sleight of hand? Instead, let's make this final move all about his toughness. Let's zoom the camera out so we can see his actions. Now, with a blade in Paul's palm and his eyes locked on Fade's, let's have him headbutt Fade, rip the blade from his side, and stab his disoriented opponent right in the neck in one swift motion. That screams toughness and determination to me, and it makes for a much more satisfying payoff than an off-screen stab. Victory by appropriate characterization. Before I get into this last category, I just want to ask you guys to subscribe if you like this. I don't have any of those yet. I have 0 subscribers. This is my first video ever. If you hate this, dislike it, leave a comment below telling me why I'm stupid. But if you like it, do me a favor and subscribe. World Cup. Strong winner, strong loser. Super Bowl. Grand finale. World Cup. Your favorite fight of all time probably falls in this category. Essentially a glorified toss-up, a World Cup occurs when the two parties facing off are equally matched, but also maximally competent. It is reserved for the face-offs between two of the strongest parties in a story's universe. So far we've decided that a good fly swatting requires characterization. A good David vs. Goliath requires strategy. A good toss-up can go either way. Good World Cups, however, require strategy from both parties and characterization from the winning side. While not necessarily the climax of a story, a World Cup should be closely tied with the story's theme. Whoever emerges victorious should do so because they align with the very point a story is trying to make. A good example of a bad World Cup fight would be the finale of The Boys Season 3. Looking at the matchup, we see Homelander, the most powerful superhero in the entire show, and I guess Ryan's there too, versus a team of Queen Maeve, a super juiced Butcher, and Soldier Boy. These are just about the strongest characters in the entire show, which makes this matchup a World Cup. So we should expect some great strategies, some great characterization, and a strong tie to the story's theme, right? Well, let's break it down. Team Butcher comes with the intention of using Soldier Boy's explosion to defeat Homelander. Okay, that's a strategy, good start. But when Soldier Boy hits Ryan, Butcher won't allow that. So he and Soldier Boy break out into their own fight. Decent characterization of Butcher, but what happened to the original plan, guys? Meanwhile, Queen Maeve initiates a solo fight with Homelander. No strategy, just punches, against the show's strongest character. Okay. Soldier Boy has Butcher dead to rights, but waits just long enough for Starlight to come in and save Butcher. And then it's a fight of the boys versus Soldier Boy, who's their one real check to Homelander. What are we doing? This whole thing turns into a complete mess. To cap it off, Queen Maeve sacrifices herself to save the others from an exploding Soldier Boy, but she lives anyway. In total, this fight had minor characterization, no strategies, and I don't think any tie to any theme at all. Worst of all, it didn't even have consequences, and I don't think it had a purpose. So not only did it fail as a World Cup, but it failed on my list of prerequisites for any fight at all, which is just a terrible look. This is where I started to lose interest in the show. For a good World Cup fight, let's go to Mustafar to look at what many consider to be the best lightsaber fight in any Star Wars movie. Obi-Wan vs. Anakin. Jedi Master vs. his apprentice, the Chosen One. A great World Cup fight that uses strategy and characterization. So why did Kenobi defeat Skywalker? If your answer was he had the high ground, hold that thought. He won because George Lucas wanted him to win, because Obi-Wan represented good, light, selflessness, and because Anakin represented evil, darkness, desire. When it boils down to it, Star Wars is the hero's journey, a battle of good and evil, a lesson that goodness prevails. Obi-Wan aligns with this point. That's why he wins. Not because he is good, but because the point of Star Wars is that good wins. The tortoise doesn't beat the hare because he is good or nice, because that's not the point of the story. The tortoise beats the hare because the tortoise aligns with the story's point of consistency. Back to the high ground point. Like I said, a good World Cup fight is decided by both strategies and characterization. So we know that Kenobi won. Obi-Wan won because his character aligns with the theme. But how about strategy? Throughout the entire fight, Anakin and Obi-Wan's strategies were offense and defense respectively. This is clearly shown through Anakin's violent thrashing and Obi-Wan's careful backtracking and defensive positioning. This is also why Obi-Wan found himself with the high ground and was able to cut him down. So the fight has strategies too, but why is it important? The two face off again in episode 4. Even though their characterization in the rematch is just as present as it was before, a battle of good versus evil, this rematch is rarely talked about, whereas the fight on Mustafar is often regarded as the peak of Star Wars combat. This is because in one, the fighting is stale and static, whereas in the other, their fighting is dynamic and ends in a win condition. Win condition, strategy, high ground, checkmate. It's all coming together. A good World Cup fight takes basically every point I have made in this video and implements it into the most unforgettable clashes in cinema history. And while I will admit the strategies of offense and defense are incredibly simple, they do get the job done. So to use the fight spectrum, that's what I'm calling it now, we need to know a general understanding of each party's relative strength before the fight started. But we also need to know who came out victorious, which is why it's a great tool to analyze a fight in retrospect. One quick caveat I have not mentioned yet is that a fight's location on the spectrum can be dynamic. Tides can turn quickly. Let's look at Avatar: The Last Airbender, Aang vs Ozai, a matchup between the strongest bender of a single element, who is further boosted by solar eclipse, versus the only bender of all 4 elements, the Last Airbender. A fairly even match between 2 masters. This is all the makings of a World Cup. Now the question is it a good World Cup? Well, what are their respective strategies as the fight kicks off? We see Ozai taking the aggressive, offense-first strategy, while Aang uses his environment around him to defend against the onslaught. Truthfully, pretty typical stuff, with some creativity points awarded to Aang for his resourcefulness. Then suddenly, the tides change. In a stroke of sheer luck, which I'm going to ignore right now, Aang enters the Avatar state. The 2 characters' relative strengths are no longer close. This fight has undoubtedly become a fly swatting. Aang is now putting on full display his mastery of all 4 elements, a spectacle that we have never seen to this extent. Ozai, like the fly he is, tries to escape but is ultimately caught by Aang, who slams him down and is about to deliver the final blow. But as we know, all good fly swatting requires characterization. That's precisely what we see when Aang releases himself from the Avatar state. His good character is on full display here. He's in full control and will do things his way. He won't stoop to simply killing Ozai. Once Aang is back out of the Avatar state, the fight dynamic shifts one last time, returning to the World Cup status. But this time, Aang checks the boxes that we love to see. His strategy of energy bending is the only way to defeat the Fire Lord without killing him. Initiating the bending battle puts the king in check. Then we see the 2 clash, and checkmate. Aang, of course, wins. But why does he win? The Lion Turtle says it himself. Because Aang's spirit is unbendable, he cannot be corrupted. How well does this resolution match up with our understanding of the story's theme? Well, all series long, Aang has faced pressures to change in order to save the world. People want him to sacrifice his youthfulness, his relationships, and even his humanity in order to defeat the Fire Lord. But as we see in this World Cup climax, Aang remains in control and does things his way. He's unbendable. Pretty perfect alignment if you ask me. So in summary, the fight started as a pretty run-of-the-mill World Cup. As things spiced up, it was a fantastic display of fly swatting. Despite the reliance on luck, I think the fight quickly redeems itself. In the fight's third act, we get a perfect World Cup conclusion that ties the story together in a nice little bow. My biggest knock with this fight is that Ozai never really had a strategy beyond brute force, but that bend battle really makes up for it. With all this talk of good and bad fights, it's only fair I include my personal favorite fight scene of all time. I was trying to think of where it falls on the chart, and I've concluded that, like Avatar, it's a bit of a double-header. Part 1, the Scouts vs the Beast Titan, David vs Goliath. It's Attack on Titan. Obviously, the greatest show has the greatest fight scene, no surprises there. At the end of the show's first major climax, the Scouts have returned to Shiganshina and are effectively pinned by the Beast, Armored, and Colossal Titans. Some major David vs Goliath vibes. This is the type of challenge I want characters to face. Watching this, I had no idea how they're going to get out. But of course they do, with none other than strategy. Commander Erwin steals the show with the most unforgettable speech that probably every fan of the show can still recite. The soldiers are going to race to their deaths. They're going to rage. Waves after waves of soldiers are brutally clobbered by boulders thrown by the Beast Titan. Yet they keep marching forward, smoking out the battlefield. They keep falling, and marching, until there's one soldier that remains. Checkmate. Part 2. Levi vs the Beast Titan. Fly swatting. What seemed like a pathetic attempt at a final gambit was actually a brilliant facade that allowed the Scouts to set up their strongest piece. And with that, they were no longer the flies, but now the swatter. Up until this point, the Beast Titan seemed untouchable after laying waste to any and every scout that crossed his path. Against Levi, however, he didn't leave a scratch. In 52 seconds of screen time, Levi unleashed a flurry of tactical slices to the hands, eyes, and heels, fully incapacitating the Beast Titan. Punctual, terrifying, perfect. Why is this my favorite fight scene of all time? I think it has everything across the board, covers every prerequisite. The stakes are clear, the human race as they know it is on the brink of extinction. Consequences are abundant, countless characters meet their ends, including beloved Aaron Smith. Purpose is there too, This fight touches on an occurring theme of having to sacrifice one's humanity in order to defeat evil. Strategies employed were airtight, from both sides even, and characterization was present across every step. Erwin's legacy as a stone-cold gambler was solidified on that battlefield. Levi became everyone's favorite character as he ruthlessly avenged his fallen comrades. I could go on, but if you've seen it, you get it, and if not, then do yourself a favor and watch it. Even though I just spoiled the best part. Sorry. So for now, that's everything I have to say about fight scenes. I'm curious what everyone thinks of the fight spectrum. I would definitely want to revisit this concept again sometime and see if the ideas hold up. I've got a couple other ideas for some videos, so if you enjoyed this one, maybe subscribe so you don't miss them. And next time you're watching a fight, consider where it falls on the spectrum, and if it's a tomato, a cherry, or the whole dessert.